Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin, check. You already know. Let's go. Golden Blued is a college football YouTube channel for entertainment. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into our next college football video. First off, this ACC thing it's difficult to explain because I think as a whole, right now, the ACC is a strong conference. They do have great brands within the ACC. The problem that you run into whenever you talk about the ACC is the future of the ACC. Will it stay intact? Will it stay a conference? Will teams leave? Will they be able to refill with other teams to remain a power conference? That's where you run into problems as far as trying to determine the future of the ACC. As far as the teams that are in the ACC, there's not a lot of teams currently in the ACC that actually need this conference to stay in existence, because Clemson, I think they're going to be headed to the SEC. I really do. I think the SEC will offer them money once the ACC does dissolve, whether they have the 8 teams now or whether it's a year from now, 2 years from now, or if the ACC is able to last their entire contract. Eventually, I do think Clemson ends up in the SEC. Same thing with Florida State. I think they end up in the SEC as well. I think the SEC welcomes them in with open arms. I don't think Florida will like it really all that much, but they'll accept it. Syracuse, they're a different story. I think they would have a home in the Big 10 or the Big 12. Louisville is probably Big 12 or bust. They don't have AAU status to get into the Big 10, and I don't think that the SEC is too interested in Louisville. NC State, I think they could be Big 12 or SEC. North Carolina, Big 10, SEC, they have AAU status. And with North Carolina, wherever they go, Duke will follow. So if North Carolina goes to the Big 10, Duke will follow them to the Big 10. If they go to the SEC, then Duke will follow them to the SEC as well. Pitt, I think their options would be either the Big 10 or the Big 12. It just depends on if the Big 10 wants another market in the state of Pennsylvania, because Pitt does have AAU status. Georgia Tech, I think they'd have options either in the Big 10 or the Big 12. I don't think the SEC wants another market in the state of Georgia. Miami, Florida, I'd say SEC or Big 12. Not too sure that the SEC would be interested in Miami, especially Florida. Florida would be more against Miami than Florida State. Then Virginia, they'd have the option of the Big 10 or the SEC. They have AAU status right now. Virginia Tech, they're going after AAU status, but they don't have it yet. If they do end up getting that, then I think their options could be all 3 conferences, Big 10, SEC, or Big 12. Just depends on if they got picked up by either the Big 10 or the SEC. So really the only 2 teams that are currently in the ACC that need this thing to keep going to guarantee that they remain in a power conference would be Wake Forest and Boston College. The rest of the teams, they don't need the ACC to continue to exist. And the problem with ACC is making good decisions. Y'all already know my opinion about West Virginia. I think that would have been a great decision for the ACC to bring in West Virginia, not just now, but a decade ago, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, whenever they first formed. I think West Virginia should have been in the ACC from the get-go, but they didn't want West Virginia. The biggest problem was Maryland. But another problem that went into that as far as not wanting West Virginia in the ACC is Tobacco Road. Duke, North Carolina, and to some extent, NC State. And that factors in now and the future. Tobacco Road is a big-time issue whenever it comes to the ACC remaining a power legitimate conference. The ACC has been going by the direction of what North Carolina, Duke, and somewhat what NC State wants. I mean, you even look at the ACC getting rid of divisions. I think that was the right decision, but you look at the rivalries that are protected and the rivalries that aren't protected, it favors those teams on Tobacco Road the most. Now, you still have rivalries like Clemson, Georgia Tech, that's protected. Miami and Florida State, that's protected. Virginia Tech, that's protected. But a lot of these other rivalries, they're not protected. On the other hand, Duke and North Carolina, Duke and NC State, North Carolina, protected. Those games will be played every single year. But for instance, in 2023, Virginia Tech, Miami will not be played. That's a game that I think needs to be played every year. They are former Big East rivals. They like playing each other. That rivalry could be protected. And let me say this. I understand that not every good rivalry can be protected. But I think some of these should be protected every year. The other one is Miami and Pitt. So from what I'm understanding is 3 rivalries are protected every year. For Miami, the 3 rivalries that should be protected are Miami, Virginia Tech, Miami, Pitt, and then Miami, Florida State. Those should be the rivalry games that should be protected for the Miami Hurricanes. Another game that's not going to be played this year, Florida State, NC State. That's a good rivalry. I like watching that game every year. That's one of Florida State's rivalries that should be protected. Same with NC State. But since it's not a North Carolina school, they're not going to protect it for NC State. Another one could be Syracuse, Louisville. I know that's not a bigger rivalry game, but for those two teams, that might be one of their bigger games that could turn into a great rivalry that could bring in a lot of money for the ACC. That's what I'm not understanding with the ACC. They're not protecting games that would bring in the most money for the ACC. And that's the problem that I have with the ACC never bringing in West Virginia. West Virginia and a lot of these teams, they already have great rivalries going on, and West Virginia and the rest of those teams could probably develop great rivalries. West Virginia would bring in a lot of eyeballs and TV revenue for a lot of these teams. So it's just a bad business decision that the ACC never brought in West Virginia. And no, now I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. I think it's a better chance of the ACC dissolving and the Big 12 picking up rivalries of West Virginia than West Virginia going into the ACC. The ACC just can't seem to make good decisions, and that's including giving Notre Dame a nuke vote. In exchange, they put in their clause, if Notre Dame joins a conference between 2036, it has to be the ACC. Well, what does that really do for you? What if they choose to not join a conference like they have for the past 100 years? You really didn't give yourself much leverage. You gave all the leverage to Notre Dame. If there's 7 other teams and Notre Dame makes 8, they get to vote to nuke the ACC and dissolve the grant of rights. And Notre Dame was never interested in joining as a full-time football member. Come on, ACC. Think when you make these contract negotiations. Fast forward to 2024. Florida State, Louisville. Now, that's not that big of a rivalry, and I would protect some other rivalries for Florida State over that. So that one I can let pass. Syracuse, Virginia Tech, that one most certainly should be protected. Syracuse, Virginia Tech, former Big East rivals. That's a big game for both of those teams, so I think it should be protected. Louisville, NC State, that could be an argument, but I would rather protect NC State and Florida State along with NC State, Duke, NC State, North Carolina for NC State. Boston College, Virginia Tech, I actually think that's worth looking into as far as protecting. They are also former Big East rivals, and for Boston College, there's not really a lot of matchups that's worth protecting as far as rivalry games that should be played every year. So Boston College, Virginia Tech, definitely worth looking into. And in 2024, once again, Miami does not play Virginia Tech. So that's 2 years in a row that those two teams will not play each other. Fast forward to 2025, once again, Florida State, NC State will not play. Syracuse, Miami Hurricanes, once again, will not play. And Miami Hurricanes Pitt, once again, will not play. Then finally, 2026, Syracuse, Virginia Tech won't play once again. Wake Forest, NC State won't get to play that year. So it doesn't matter that Wake Forest is in the state of North Carolina. They're not part of the trifecta, meaning NC State, Duke, and North Carolina. So they're not going to protect that rivalry for Wake Forest. Boston College, Virginia Tech, I've already talked about it. Not going to be played again in 2026. But in all 4 of those years, North Carolina will play both Duke and NC State. Duke will play both North Carolina and NC State. And NC State will play both Duke and North Carolina. So those 3 teams in the state of North Carolina will play each other every single year, at least for the next 4 years, and probably for the foreseeable future as long as the ACC stays in business. So they made sure to protect those rivalries, but these other rivalries, who cares? Doesn't really have anything to do with what those teams on Tobacco Road want. So I guess Clemson and Georgia Tech should be grateful that they protected that rivalry. Florida State and Miami should be grateful that they protected that rivalry. Virginia and Virginia Tech, they should be grateful that they protected that rivalry, right? That's what it looks like in my eyes. Decisions need to be made that are in the best interest of the entire conference, not that are just in the best interest of 3 teams. Otherwise, well, you're going to go down the road that the ACC is going down right now. Hey, there's still time to correct this, ACC. Are you listening? There's still time to correct this. But if you don't correct it, you're not going to last much longer. You will dissolve. Even if you backload and bring in a bunch of group of 5 teams, you probably won't be able to retain power status, and you definitely won't be as strong as you are now. All those bad decisions in the past are now haunting you right now and will probably cost you a position at the table as far as the playoffs go when it comes to the future. Y'all let me know in the comments section, number 1, do you think that the ACC can keep everybody together till 2036? Do you think they dissolve before then? Do you think they will be able to backload if those teams do leave to be able to stay a power conference and have a seat at the table for the playoffs? Or do you think that the ACC actually does make some good changes in the best interest of the ACC, not just for like a couple or 3 teams? Because there is time, but they have to make the right decisions starting right now. That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.